This room is right next to the toilet.
All right, and we're live. Welcome to the Hub of the Show, where you can get ideas to help you grow your eco-conscious business. And today I am joined by Caroline Aistrop from Green Spark Marketing, and we're talking about green PR and telling your sustainability stories. So I'm really excited for the show. Welcome, Caroline, and great to have you on the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here.
Fantastic. So Caroline specialises in green PR and sustainability storytelling, and for over 30 years she has focused on inspiring people to be fascinated about the natural world and to make greener choices. So we're going to launch straight into the questions, and I'm really excited to find out about you. You used to work in wildlife conservation when you were 13, and me coming from Africa, I mean, I love wildlife and conservation, so I was keen to sort of ask you a bit more about that. And how has that guided your life?
Well, it was when I've been fascinated by animals ever since I was a toddler, apparently, according to my mother. And when I was 13, I decided I wanted to work in wildlife conservation. I wanted to be a fashion designer just before that, so a little bit of a complete switch in what I wanted to do. But yeah, that just felt so right, and that's just guided everything ever since. So I went on to study for a zoology degree. But I have to say, when I looked at my lecturers, I thought, do I want to stay in academia, or do I actually want to get out in the real world? Because I'd always been more interested in actually talking to people and communicating. And I realised that actually a scientist who can communicate is something of an unusual thing in the science world. You know, they do great, fantastic work in all their discoveries, but scientists are not particularly well known for being communicators. So that has always really been my path, and I just love inspiring. The natural world is so fascinating. It's like a never-ending detective novel when you're trying to find out all the answers, but you never do, because always a new bit of evidence comes across and is found out. So it's a great subject to be talking to people about. So that led me to working with the British Trust for Conservation Volunteers, the Wildfowl and Wetlands Trust, the RSPB. For 13 years, I was chief exec of a small environmental charity called Stroud Valleys Project, whose role was to inspire people within the Stroud district to learn about and to love and to look after their local environment and make it a great place for both people and wildlife, because, you know, two are really interlinked. So yeah, that's been my life. I've loved it for over 30 years.
Fantastic. Some great places to work as well. And is it, talking about your sustainability story, is it difficult to learn how to tell a sustainability story?
It's not, to be honest. I mean, obviously some people are better at words and writing and creating than others, you know, that's certainly true. But it is really, it's straightforward to learn, but there are principles behind it. You just got to learn to tell it in the right way. And one of the most important things to do when you're telling your story is to really put yourself in the shoes of the people who you are talking to, that you're trying to reach, and sort of think about how they view the subject now, and what you'd like them to know and to feel about the subject. Because often emotion is something that's left out of a lot of the communications around sustainability, because obviously for so many years it's been the scientists discovering the facts, which needs to happen, but they've been a bit short on the emotion. So I think the emotion is a really important bit that we've got to put into sustainability communications now. But as long as you follow the right principles and the approach, then it should be straightforward and should help you to avoid getting into that sin bin of greenwashing.
Yeah, definitely. And I know you also specialize in the psychology of green, you know, and how people react to environmental messages, and you know, how biodiversity and business are kind of dependent on each other as well. I mean, you were saying, sort of, you know, the greenwashing, and I know people have sort of like this, you know, this eco side, and, you know, people getting really stressed out about what's going on in the world. Can you tell us a bit more about this?
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating. I mean, I've been interested in psychology of humans for a long time, since my university days, and I studied psychology for a bit whilst I was there. But in the past 10, 15 years, there's a new sector of psychology that's arisen called environmental psychology, funnily enough. And also a lot of the big companies have been doing market research over the past 10 years or so, looking at how consumers respond to environmental messages, because obviously for them, the marketing, getting the message right is really important, because it equates to profits, people buying their goods and services. And they've been very good in actually making the results of that market research freely available. And it's been really fascinating, showing that actually different people respond to environmental messages in different ways. The environmentalists were usually passionate about actually saving the planet, and that has been the message that's been really promoted most of the time in sustainability communications. But this research is showing that actually you need to talk about it in different ways. There are people for whom that message just doesn't resonate with them. It doesn't prompt them into action and to making changes. And actually that applies to most people. So there are some sector of society where they want to be green, but they don't know how to be. But for them, the peer group's the most important thing. It's being part of that peer group, their peer group seeing what they're doing what others are doing. So influencers are really important to this group. You've got another group of people for whom the practical side of things are the most important things. What's the cost effectiveness? What's the efficiency of the product or service? Does it do the job they wanted to do? Does it make their life easier? That's really what will switch them on to making a greener choice. And then there's a group of people for whom whatever you say, it's not going to make a difference. They're the indifferents. This is all a load of nonsense. The environmentalists are, blowing this all out of proportion, doesn't exist. And they'll only be green when actually there's no other choice. So, you just don't bother trying to communicate with them, essentially. So, and so you've got to really tailor your message to the different groups that you want to try and reach. And I find it all fascinating.
Yeah, and I suppose you can, at least at the start, if you are trying to do that, focus on the ones that you're going to create a bigger impact with first, and then you can widen that net, can't you?
Yes, yeah. So actually, some of the research I particularly use for my business, those practical people were actually the biggest section of the consumer market, it was found, followed by the people for whom the tribe and the peer group are more important. And actually the advocates, the really committed green people, were actually the smallest section of the research, funnily enough. So I think it's really important to actually really to put aside your own particular passions for saving the planet and go, right, okay, if I want to talk to this group, what do I need to be saying to them? Even if it's not what I would naturally say, automatically, what do I need to be saying to them to switch them to green?
Yeah, definitely. And if it's going to, what's in it for them, if it's going to make their life easier, if it's going to save them money and stuff like that, it's all a bonus, isn't it? So they're more likely to go, okay, well, I'll give it a go.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, for me, I don't actually care how people get to being green. I just want them to be greener.
That's good. Yeah, that's a good underlying thing to follow on from. That's brilliant. So what is your top eco tip then? I know this is going to be a hard one. People struggle with it. But...
Well, I don't know. Having worked in the sector for a long time, I often get asked this. And my advice to people is just to pick whatever subject really fires your particular interest. Because if you look at what we have to do to be green, it can just be so overwhelming. And again, psychological research shows that if people feel overwhelmed, if they feel like the issue is so big that they personally can't make a difference, then they just switch off. So, my advice has always been pick what bit of environment really interests you and really work on that. So, for example, I've got good friends for whom biodiversity, which of course is my passion, but biodiversity goes over their head. They're not interested in biodiversity really at all. But recycling, you talk to them about recycling and they're just passionate. They can't believe that we are throwing away all these resources that could be reused again and again, you see. So get to people by encouraging them to concentrate on that thing that really fires their enthusiasm, and then hopefully they might then, once they've been doing that, move on to other things.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's so true. Very true. Okay, well, we'll come to the end of the show, but I know you have got a couple of things coming up. So you're doing a coaching program, which is starting in October. So you can find Caroline at greensparkmarketing.co.uk, and she will be advertising that as well, I'm sure, on LinkedIn and on the website soon. Yeah. And you've also got next week, you've got a half-hour free webinar about telling your sustainability story. So if you go onto Eventbrite and you put telling your sustainability story in there, you should come across it. But we can also add the links to the show. So fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us, Caroline. It's such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Oh, it's been great. I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's been great.
Brilliant. No, some really good tips. They're really good insights. Yeah, and please, if you're watching it live or you're watching the replay, keep your comments coming, and both Caroline and I will keep an eye on those. And if you're on YouTube, do subscribe, and you'll get notifications in the future. But we'll see you same time next week. Goodbye for now.